I'm Michael Musselman. I'm one of the co-founders of PCAN, Partner Cloud Alliance Network, which is AWS's partner's largest partner leader, partner account managers, partner marketing collective. Also spent a lot of time at an ISV or an independent software vendor partnering with various routes to market, but I specifically spent the last better of 6 years partnering with AWS and building those cloud partnerships. So great to meet everyone. Excited for the show.
And thank you, Michael. So, like you, different roles throughout ISVs, throughout software companies, many different journeys. But key one, I would say, the last 14 years is that engagement with AWS, particularly with a company called Splunk, and then with other companies launching on AWS Marketplace. I see it as a critical route to market. I think it's really important, especially with the group that you've created, co-founded, actually bring that realization of the value of hyperscalers, and in particular, the largest hyperscaler in the business. One of the key events, which is every year, December, Las Vegas, with 70,000 plus people, is reInvent. And I know a lot of ISVs, I said, should we attend? Should we not attend? It's great understanding the roadmap, but do we sponsor? We've just signed up with AWS. Do we sponsor? What's your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. And I think it really depends. It's expensive. Depends on who you are, who your customers are. This goes further back in the journey about your routes to market, the scale of your company. As founders leading everything, how many employees do you have? How many customers do you have? Do your customers and your ideal customer profile attend reInvent? I think all of those things you have to ask yourself and consider when you're exiting, depending on the culture of the company and some of the things that I've mentioned. But when you're exiting Series B, probably Series C, you're starting to scale. If you're built on AWS, maybe by now are selling through the AWS Marketplace. Your customers probably are AWS customers. They buy through the AWS Marketplace. I think this is one of the first trade shows you would consider in your marketing demand budget. Is not just whether you're giving money to the booth presence or not. It's your preparation and some of the things you can do before, during, and after. Then when you look back, you're like, oh, this was really worth it to me. I think if it's like anything else you get out of things, which you put into them. So if this is just a checkbox, you might not get a return on your investment. But if you treat it like an entire event and you're planning for this, you might find totally different results.
It's exactly what you say, right? Which is you need to be proactive. You can't just turn up, can listen, you can get lost very quickly. You can turn up early, you can do an AWS certification, which is great. They give you discounts. There's some benefits in that. You can attend all the shows. There are thousands of people, and it's very easy not to talk to anyone because there are so many people. It is in that preparation. It's about if you do have your PDM, your account manager is saying, okay, this is my vertical. This is who I need to meet. These are the people that we're interacting with. Are there specific customers, prospects that are going? Sometimes there are mutual partnerships, maybe the GSIs that you can look at and you can connect beforehand. Quite a lot of the time, the GSIs do some good events, right? So, and co-sponsor, can you get involved in that? What's your thoughts? Is reInvent that first step in, or would you go for a summit over a reInvent?
Yeah, I'd recommend to any startup when you've made the decision that this makes sense for you, sponsoring reInvent is probably the first show. If North America is your primary target and that's where you're building your business. Even if you're not, if you're purely international or APAC and you have no presence in the US, then I wouldn't recommend reInvent. Assuming for a lot of the companies we talked to and we've worked at, this is where they got started. They were headquartered somewhere in the US and Canada. And this just seems like the biggest show. It's always in Las Vegas. It's the week after Thanksgiving in the States. So it tends to be ending of the year. What I was saying before, as far as preparation, even before you get to this point, I have seen, and I actually think it's probably a good idea, is to attend the show. So I've seen several CEOs, CROs pay for tickets or just be in Las Vegas during the time, right? Because the other thing is true is if this is your customer base, they're all probably going to be at the show. So whether it's a summit or whether it's reInvent, Sponsorship is one question. And I think that also parallels with, are you actually prepared to be an AWS partner? And am I going to start leaning into the partnership? And am I investing in that? And that's a small thing, is actually sponsoring reInvent actually does validate you as a partner committed to AWS as well. But even around the show, happy hours and events, let's just say in your pipeline, you have 10 opportunities that you're working on. It's very likely all 10 or 5 of the 10 or the executives, the economic buyers at those companies may be attending reInvent themselves. So getting them to your events, having them go grab breakfast or lunch or dinner with you or your sales team, all of that is incredibly powerful. And then once you decide to sponsor the show, I still think it's up to your company, your sales team to drive qualified meetings face to face. So it's a lot of the preparation, the show itself, and just handing out swag and collecting leads. Those are just going to be really hard stuff. But if you are telling your customers and prospects, we're going to see there, come meet us at the booth, go to our happy hour, I think all of that can have a huge impact on the brand or making you look like a bigger company than you are.
I think it's interesting you mentioned the leadership and the commitment to the AWS relationship, because quite often when you have that discussion with the CFO around how many tickets, are you doing one ticket? Are you doing two tickets? Or are you going to go over the package of 10 with the extra ticket? And then
Yeah.
you can see the commitment. A CRO is going to attend, a sales leader is going to attend from your company. And you also have the engineers who are attending to understand, okay, so how do I embed the latest features, functionality? What's coming up on the roadmap? Can I influence the roadmap? So there's that complete commitment versus I've been at some companies that just say, hey, look, Andrew, you just go on your own and do as much as you can.
This isn't the kind of show where you just show up and throw a tabletop over that. It requires a lot of planning. Your chief marketing officer, whoever's running marketing or your events, they're going to be involved. This is a pretty big event project plan. And you're right, all the way down to who attends, what do we talk about, what's our demos look like, what are we giving away, what's our messaging, what's our better together. I don't think we're going to cover it today, but we'll put a link in the show notes. I just wrote an article on LinkedIn, which actually is, when do I start scaling my AWS partnership? And it's 6 foundational milestones. You mentioned a couple of them right there, but it's, has my leadership bought into this? Are we moving from founder-led everything to now actually hiring people, having a sales team, having customers and pipeline? And are we building our playbook? Are we now thinking about our partnership journey and indirect revenue and just the channels that can help us grow our business and all of that stuff? I think that's where it even starts to make sense. Do I make this kind of investment? Because it's not cheap.
Yeah.
And even in my past at Lacework, we were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I'd have friends and peers at Mongo and Snowflake and Databricks, and they're spending billions of dollars in this show. And I would still ask that they were still finding an ROI. But if I'm a little baby company with 30 employees, I'm probably not going to get the same ROI as if I'm a global 1,000-person employee, 100-something salespeople. When my business is built out, that investment, I actually might see a return.
Reinvent on a shoestring. For me, there is value in attending. And I have been at companies where it is just me and I've made an impact. In terms of that, in your opinion, let's say you don't get a stand. What's the key things you can do to make it seem as though you are invested in AWS in terms of a go-to-market strategy and making the most of that time, back-to-back meetings? What would you suggest?
Yeah, there's no substitution for executive sponsorship and lean in. So as long as the executives to the team, whatever that means for your company, it's usually the CEO or co-founders or chief revenue officer. Like, you have to be committed to this. The analogy I use, and we teach a lot in our Master Pal courseware, I use this analogy of growing an apple tree from a seed, right? It's like you plant the seed, you give it some water, fertilizer, and then it sprouts and you're so excited. And then, it's a journey, right? Before that tree matures and you get apples on it, it's a journey. It's a multi-year journey. But, what happens if you're like 8 months in and you're like, I don't want to take care of it anymore. I don't want to water it. Well, you're never going to get a single apple on that tree. The tree's going to die. And I think partnerships, it's an equal parallel, an analogy to that thing as well, is once you plant the seed, once you start watering it, once you start fertilizing it, I'm not saying you have to go plant an orchard of 100 trees, but You should be committed to that. And in my company and every company I've worked for, the folks that are committed to that have to start at the top. So you have to have that executive kind of lean in. And then the other thing we've talked about it, like I could sponsor it very much. There's ways that you can get into the showroom, but there's also things you can do around it. Like I said, we have rented out restaurants. We have rented out even a small sponsor. We've joined friends at Snowflake and others and sponsored their big events so that we could capture leads or meet our prospective customers, drafting off some of the things that we've done. So there's a lot of other tactics that you can do to begin your AWS partnership, and you start to, I'll say, climb the partner ladder. There are things that are available to you. Marketing development funds is one of them, but you can use it for your auxiliary events. So let's just pretend I sponsor the smallest booth in reInvent and I'm a sponsor of the show. And then we go co-sponsor with Splunk or some other security partners of ours. We go co-sponsor one of their events and maybe my participation is 10 grand. The way that MDF works is I can match dollar for dollar. So it costs me $5,000 out of pocket. AWS would commit to that. And the goal is generate leads, go follow up on those leads, do things that generate pipeline for us. But that's another way, a tactic to start thinking about as you start to mature.
The community that you've co-founded, we met up last year. We meet up at reInvent on a regular basis. We got 30 people or so. It's not hard to arrange when everyone's there. When you've got thousands of people, it's not hard to arrange things like that. And we talk about it on the Master Pal course, is also understanding who you are. We've talked about speaking AWS language, having that superpower. How do you create that? What is that differentiator? And it's important. You've got 70,000 people there. How are you going to be memorable to those AWS engagements, be it a customer, prospect, or actually AWS themselves?
I'll give other tactics. Once we were scaled up and we started going from the smallest booth to, I think at Lacework, we ended up as a platinum sponsor. It's a pretty big booth. It was definitely expensive. I was also very conscientious about who was staffing the booth, right? So speaking AWS's language, knowing the 200, 300 services, knowing that, one of the failures is, oh, we'll just drop in our BDRs or SDRs to just go manage the booth. And that may or may not be the right resource. So by then I had a fairly scaled team. It was global, but like we used reInvent. My team worked the booth. Why? We knew what we did. We knew how to speak AWS and our better together story. And that tends to resonate with the kind of prospects running around. But we also had salespeople. We did have some of our SDRs there. We had our product marketing. We had marketing people. So we started to cherry pick. We would create contests and games. So people wanted to go free trip to Vegas. You got to work, but you can have fun too. So the reps that drove the most meetings got to go to the show. Maybe they didn't have to work, but they actually got to go see their customers and prospects, take them out to dinner. But we prepared them. We wrote scripts. We qualified, and between myself and my marketing team, like we made sure it was all the preparation, not just the logistics of the show, but literally what we said, what we demoed, who was there. Did they know this? Did they understand our superpower in context to AWS? Did they understand enough proof points? Could they name drop customers that we've helped before that were AWS customers that had this challenge before they met us, and then what we did afterwards? I know Splunk and where you guys were, you would literally start planning for reInvent the day after reInvent, right? Like when you get to that level, it was at least 6 months before where we're literally planning who's going to be there. What are we talking about? We'd already committed to the booth next year. Once that flywheel's spinning, there's just a lot to consider. I would just say, once you make the investment, it's a big investment. It was for sure the most money we spent at any of the trade shows. But why did we do it? Like we got good at it, and the ROI was there every year.
Yeah. And that's the key thing, right? The ROI. I think just coming back to the AWS language, it's important that we talk about ISVs. I think most people know what an ISV is, but when you talk about MPOP, when you talk about MAP, when you talk about, there's a whole load of things, and no doubt they've already degregated SPOPs, and now that's merged to MPOP. Actually understanding that, being on cruise and being able to have a conversation not only with AWS, but also those consumers of AWS who understand how they can leverage it. That's real benefit. And you're in some ways acting as a consultant as well.
Make no mistake, like myself and my executive team, my CRO, my CEO that attended, we would circle the booth and go say hi. This was actually the other side of it, which is meeting AWS executives, meeting AWS sales leaders, meeting sales teams. Like we actually spent a lot of time working on our AWS partnership at reInvent, right? There was this whole path of the business and ROI and prospects and customers. But then there was this other track where me and my team and my executives were obviously working on our partnership, making friends, having friends introduce us to new friends, understanding what they're releasing. How do we maybe attach to that stuff? And then over time, we also became launch partners at a lot of this stuff. So it'd be pretty common in one of the keynotes, our company was being referenced or our engineering team was being asked to speak, right, about a co-build exercise we did with AWS. And I think it's hard to measure. It's all branding and visibility, but that's the kind of stuff that over time it matters, right? It actually does. I've got plenty of pictures where we're in press releases or the CEO of AWS is talking and our logo's right next to their head. And I just think it's huge validation once you've decided to plant the tree and grow it and fertilize it. Like these are all points of wins and validations on the partnership.
Yeah, it's that visibility internally within AWS, which is invaluable. And having so many key people from AWS, I think is certainly from a young ISV, a young startup, there's opportunities, there's programs to meet
Yeah.
different execs, depending on which regions you are, depending on how many slots you get. For example, a lot of companies I've worked with is very much security or BFSI. And actually sitting with those leaders or key account managers of Bank of America, JPMC, Barclays, HSBC, they all attend. I also wouldn't be insulted if they didn't turn up because sometimes it's busy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And meetings get canceled. But that visibility for me, that awareness within AWS, even now from relationships of what, 5, 6, 7 years ago,
Yeah.
I'm going to leverage those relationships. Even though I'm in a different company, I can leverage those relationships. And that's, I think the ROI you were talking about, 70,000 people, right?
Yeah.
And without doubt, your prospects and customers will be in there, be it as a technical manager or even sometimes senior leadership.
Remember, you're not getting the list. So you don't know who's going to be
Right.
there, which goes back to preparation. It's really important for your sales team to ask their prospects and customers, hey, are you or anyone going to reInvent? And the trick on both sides, individual contributors and leaders, is a lot of times I'll ask people at AWS, are you going? And they're like, I'm not, but my boss's boss is going. And I'm like, awesome. That's actually how I've met more senior people at AWS when I've earned the right. In the beginning, an AWS executive that you want to go get a meeting with has meetings with the top customers and the top partners. They're not going to have time for you. Between your PDM and your account manager who sells into your account, you can go find other people in their orgs, in other places. I use the word partnerships synonymous with friendships. These are business friendships. But the truth is, like, relationships still matter. This is still a people business. People still matter. And you are right. There's many people that I've been working with for years and years that they know me, they trust me. I have a good brand with them. And you're right. I might be wearing a different jersey on a different team, but the reality is they want to help because I've already proven that we're a good partner for the same reason that executives I've worked with in the past know me, they know my work ethic. Like that goes a long way. And so you'll find the same thing in partnerships. You'll find the same thing at reInvent. You'll find the same thing with partnering with AWS. Actually, let me ask you. So you on the other side, I've led partners, VP, but I haven't been a CRO and you've run all revenue.
Yeah.
So flip the script from that perspective. That's again, you're closer to you've got a seat at the round table of the C levels. You're making decisions about go to market. You're ultimately on the hook for pipeline and revenue. Now, where does your vote go when it comes to the CEO and the CMO about this thing?
Thing is, you say it's the maturity of the company, right? And obviously the spend that you can afford. I think sometimes it's if you've got a very strong partner alliance lead, it's worth investing in that individual going to understand, is there a good fit? If you're in BFSI, if you're enterprise, mid-market, security, there are a lot of check boxes. If you've got a very good partner alliance lead, they can leverage it. They're most likely to be proactive in their approach and they can leverage their relationships. That would be a sort of series, I would say more series B rather than series A. It depends on
Yeah.
the funding and it depends on where you're at.
It depends on what your value with AWS is. If AWS needs you and doesn't compete with you, you're in a unique spot. You may actually lean in much earlier than, if they have a service that you compete with and you still haven't mentally decided, are they friend or foe yet? You're just not experienced enough in that journey, or you haven't hired someone like us who can articulate they're going to sell their stuff. But trust me, our differentiation is going to be better for these kind of customers, these kind of segments. And we're going to go make friends over there and we're going to compete over there. So at that revenue level, truth be told, like I grew up as a security startup, right?
Yeah.
Newsflash, who are the biggest sponsors? Who are the biggest partners for AWS? You mentioned your old company. We didn't compete, but CrowdStrike, Palo Alto, who we did compete with. I think competition plays a role in the decision as well.
Yeah.
So like sometimes you have to do things because your competitors are already doing them. I don't always find companies that think about that or evaluate that, but look, this is the game you're playing. And so if your number one competitor is at the show, has a big presence, you not being there. So does that come into your reasoning and kind of the conversation as well?
Completely. I was training an inside sales team. I was just trying to give the basics of what AWS Marketplace is. And I said it's like a grocery store, right? Essentially, you're hitting the easy button and you want to be on the shelves within that grocery store. And what you're talking about is the largest grocery store globally that gives you the biggest amount of visibility to over 5 million customers. If you're missing, then you are definitely missing an opportunity. And I think that's the thing. I'd also say from a CRO point of view, if you have a look at the amount of business you're doing, I'm thinking about 20 to 30 million. You look at the average deal size, as you say, there are certain areas that are really key. AI is number one at the moment. Security always.
Always.
So it's making sure you're in the mix. Otherwise, you will not be considered for your RFPs, your RFIs. You just won't be considered in terms of a proper player when it comes to the Forrester Wave, Gartner Magic Quadrant. Again, all of these things influence those analysts because the analysts are there, right? And the GSIs who are consulting and the experts in everything, they're not seeing you. And that can cause challenges in terms of your partner ecosystem and therefore your go-to-market and your scale and your revenue outcomes as well.
There's another bit of advice that I give too is once you decide, I always tell my company, you can't take it away. Because one of the things that I see, someone's there last year, they're not this year. Or they had the big Emerald sponsorship and then they don't. So I've coached my and many other friends and companies, like once you commit to this ongoing. Stay at the phase you're at. If you're like in the little startup pavilion, stay there. If you sponsor bronze, gold, whatever the colors are, like stay at that level till you're ready to commit to the next level. And once you commit at that level, stay at that level. Don't go down. Don't go up and down. Trust me. Everyone notices. AWS notices. The natural reaction is there must be something wrong with them or their company. They can't afford it. Something's going on. Why were they here before and they're not now? So I also think that's another thing to consider. It's another vector that I think people don't really think through. And I've done that many times. I just said, no, let's just stay gold sponsor. But the second we went up to platinum, I just said, this is in the budget from here on out. Otherwise, let's just stay at the smaller booth. Let's just do what we can there. Is the grocery store. I do use that a lot too. But remember, these are like superstores in states like the Walmarts and Sam's Club. Like these are big stores. They got thousands and thousands of products. So you have to remember too, keep your expectations aligned with reality. Just because you're being sold in this supermarket or this Walmart superstore, you're one of thousands and thousands of products. You're on aisle 99 at the bottom left in the back. No one's seen you. You can't also expect that I'm going to have the same return where I've done entire booth buyouts. I'm lighting up the side of hotels in Las Vegas. I've got billboards and I'm the big sponsor in the front. So I think it's important to be in the room, but I also think in the beginning, it's about your preparation and execution, but also don't walk in like expecting thousands of leads and all of this ROI. The first time is your baseline.
Yeah.
Learn from it. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? What did we get? How did those leads convert? What do we do differently next time? But once you're committed, you're going to commit. So every year, figure it out, ask yourself questions, put up the mirror and get better every year. And we did over time and we've seen the results time and time again.
Yeah. And I love your apple tree analogy.
Of
Yeah.
course.
It's see the constant watering. You can't just flood
No,
the tree and then expect
no,
it to grow for the next 5 years because it
no,
doesn't work. And
no.
also partnerships is not built over a single meeting or a single dinner or a single event. It's built over a period of time and also set the right expectations. In terms of ISVs, we work day in, day out for our own little product, and we think our own little product is the best thing ever. Otherwise, we wouldn't work there, right? We believe
Yeah.
in the product. But remember, there's 150,000 plus products and services that AWS is selling. And if they don't remember, then, well, fine tune your superpower,
Yeah.
but don't be insulted. It takes time to get a reputation and an impact as well, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yep.
Cool. Listen, anything else before we wrap up?
I think this was a good topic. It's timely. Most companies are preparing for it now. I know on the community or the Ask Me Anything calls, this is a common thing that I get asked about. I didn't not answer your question about should I sponsor reInvent or the summits. I actually think reInvent's the right place to start, but it's the same thing with summits. Once I make that decision, or if I sell really heavy into Europe, I think the London Summit is milestone number one. And I used to call that like the reInvent of Europe because a lot of those European companies, resources, they're there, but they don't make the journey to the States. They're not going to Las Vegas for reInvent. And when we were getting started, it was like, all right, we sponsored reInvent. And the first summit we sponsored was the London Summit. It's the most expensive in Europe, but it was worth it. And then when we decided stateside, it was the New York Summit. So I think each of these summits globally, they depend on your go to market and your strategy. But I just know that those become like the two anchors that if I'm going to do it and spend the money, start in Europe in the London Summit first. Normally on the show, I think we'll cover like a lot of the conversations, the kind of questions we get asked. What we're trying to do is tie some concepts into some of the framework that we teach. And obviously, we've put this into practice. The goal is to make it conversational, probably answer very specific topics, tactics, threads, but you'll start to hear how you approach your cloud partnerships and what you need to do. We've mentioned a lot of things. So, if you want to, I was just going to say, maybe just summarize what we talked about today.
It's an amazing opportunity for any ISV and it's an amazing experience. So the number one thing is preparation, making sure you have commitment from top down, making sure that is a consistent thing. It's not a one-off. In terms of ROI, there is measurable, but there's also unmeasurable in terms of the visibility that you get for your company, the visibility not only from customers and prospects, but also from AWS as well. And that grows over a period of time, not only from a company perspective, but as you and I know from a personal perspective, as you build those relationships, you have more connections and you can actually bring more value to the table. I know without doubt I'll get value from reInvent and also the summits as well, because I know that person will bring value to that. And I think a C-level, again, you have to be committed that this is your route to market. You have to understand that AWS and the hyperscalers as a whole, they're huge, they're massive. You are a small part of their program and what they're trying to achieve. You need to understand how you're different and you need to understand how you actually fit into their agenda rather than your own agenda. I think that's the summary. One thing I would say, and you've mentioned it a few times, we do have a more in-depth personal training program, if you like, which is the MasterCAD. The MasterCAD is more programmatic. We hope to explore all those different areas as we move forward.
Yeah, I think that was a perfect summary of the conversation. And you're right. If you're just in the game and you're listening to these conversations, once you've anchored the foundation, the framework, then you're able to see how these things all tie together. But even in the conversation, I think we gave anyone listening some kind of actionable tactics, like things to consider, things to think about. why you would do this. And that's the goal of it.